the Earth's true position in the universe, comparatively recent formation, present chemical condition, and approaching destruction by fire. It has been demonstrated that the Earth is a plane, the surface center of which is immediately underneath the star called Polaris, and the extremities of which are bounded by a vast region of ice and water and irregular masses of land, which bear evidence of plutonic or fiery action and origin. In the geological structure of extreme northern regions, the sedimentary strata are abundant and of vast extent, while the constitution of Antarctic strata seems, on the contrary, as far yet examined, entirely igneous. The whole terminates in fog and darkness, where snow and driving hail, piercing sleet and boisterous winds, howling storms, madly mounting waves, and clashing icebergs are almost constant. The waves rise like mountains in height. Ships are heaved up to the clouds and apparently precipitated by circling whirlpools to the bed of the ocean. The winds are piercing cold and so boisterous that the pilot's voice can seldom be heard, whilst a dismal and almost continual darkness adds greatly to the danger. How far in the gloom and darkness of the south this wilderness of storm and battling elements extends, there is at present no evidence. All we can say is that man, with all his mightiest daring and power of endurance, has only succeeded in reaching the threshold of this restless, dark, and forbidding region of the material world. The earth rests upon and within the waters of the great deep. It is a vast floating island, buoyed up by the waters and held in its place by long spurs of land shooting into the icy barriers of the southern circumference. Geological researches demonstrate that it was originally a stratified structure, definite and regular in form and extent, and that all the confused and irregular formations observable in almost every part have resulted from internal convulsions. Chemical analysis proves to us the important fact that the great bulk of the earth, meaning thereby the land, as distinct from the waters, is composed of metallic oxides, or metals in combination with oxygen, and also with sulfur, chlorine, carbon, and other elements. When means are taken to remove the oxygen, it is found that many of these metallic bases are highly combustible. Experiments with electric and other subtle powers of nature render it obvious that all the elements of the earth were originally in a state of gaseous solution, or dissolved in the great menstruum of the material world, electricity. That by a sudden abstraction of this great and universal solvent, the elements were liberated, and owing to the different affinities and relative densities which had been attached to them, combination, precipitation, stratification, crystallization, and concretion successively occurred, giving rise to all the rocks, minerals, ores, deposits, and strata, which now constitute the material habitable world. That by the action of unconcrete or gaseous unprecipitated elements and free electric and actinic forces upon pre-existing germs, all the numerous forms of animal and vegetable life were brought into being, and are now maintained. However great such operations may seem to the mind of present man, all the vast structure of the physical world, and its innumerable myriads of organic beings, were the work of only a few hours. It is easily demonstrable that so rapid and intense were the processes and chemical changes, that a few days, such as we now understand by the word, were ample time to bring out of invisible, imponderable chaos all the tangible and varied elements which now exist, and to develop every possible form of beauty and elegance, and every condition of happiness and wisdom. All opinions to the contrary which are held by philosophers of the present day are the result of insufficient perception of the whole subject, which insufficient perception is again the result of self-imposed hypotheses, which bias the judgment and confuse the understanding. No man, however learned and accomplished he may be, is able to understand the simple processes of creative effort, unless he is himself a simple and humble observer of phenomena, free from the prejudices of education, and anxious only for a knowledge of the truth as it exists in reality, and not in desire and imagination. Not only is it readily demonstrable that the material world was brought into being rapidly, perfect in structure and fully sufficient in all its conditions, but that only a few thousand years have elapsed since it began to change in form and character. Mental and moral confusion followed by a decomposition in chemical and electric action, sufficient to ignite a great portion of the earth, and to reduce it to a molten incandescent state. Hence for ages the earth has been on fire, the volatile products of this internal fire being forcibly eliminated, and occasionally accumulating and exploding, have broken up the stratified formations and produced the irregular, confused condition which we now observe. Hence have arisen earthquakes, volcanoes, and other convulsions of nature. The products of volcanic action enable us to ascertain the character of the internal fire, and what are the elements concerned in the combustion. Some of these products are of a poisonous character, and being thrown out in immense volumes from craters in various parts of the earth, are dispersed by the wind and diffused through the atmosphere, often in such proportions as to act as deadly poison on both animal and vegetable life. Hence, blight and pestilence in various forms, destroying crops and inferior animals, and affecting numbers of human beings to suffering and death. When we consider the composition of the earth and its aqueous foundations, that it is a vast structure of metallic oxides, sulfurates, and chlorides, intermingled with immense strata of compounds of carbon and hydrogen, and that, as we have already shown, a great portion of the lower parts of the earth is in a molten incandescent state. The earth itself is an extended plain, resting in and upon the waters of the great deep, fitly comparable to a large vessel or ship floating at anchor, with its hold or lower compartments beneath the waterline filled with burning materials. Our knowledge of the nature and action of fire does not enable us to understand in what way the combustion can be prevented from extending when these burning materials are known to be surrounded with highly inflammable substances. Wherever a fire is surrounded with heterogeneous materials, some highly combustible and others partially or indirectly so, it is not possible in the ordinary course of nature for it to remain continually in the same condition, nor to diminish in extent and intensity. It must necessarily increase and extend itself. That this is the case is corroborated by many phenomena. The total of volcanic action is greater than it has ever been since man commenced to observe and record his observations. As the fire is gradually increasing and creeping upwards towards the thousands of miles of veins and strata filled with carbonaceous fuel, it is not possible, unless the course of nature is arrested by some special interference, for the earth to remain in its present concrete condition. The day is not far distant, nay, even now at any moment some sudden convulsive upheaving of the fiery gulf below, until it reaches and lays bare some of the lower beds of hydrocarbon, which dip at various angles from the general strata, may set them on fire. The flames would then rapidly extend and the fiery action swiftly run along the various and innumerable veins of combustible matter, which ramify in every direction throughout the whole earth. Should such an action once commence, knowing as we do that the rocks and minerals and general constituents of the earth are only oxides of inflammable bases, or of substances directly combustible, and that the affinities of these are greatly altered in the presence of highly heated carbon and hydrogen, we see clearly that such a chemical action or fire would rapidly increase in intensity, and fiercely rush in all directions, until the whole earth, with everything entering into its composition and dwelling upon and within it, would perish, decompose, and volatilize, and burst into one vast, indescribable, annihilating conflagration. The elements burning with fervent heat, again dissolving in the great solvent medium, electricity, there to remain until some creative mandate shall liberate, and again precipitate and stratify them for the formation of another world, perhaps less discordant and more enduring than the present. If we saw a number of persons on some huge raft, tossed up and down on the surface of the ocean, we should naturally feel alarmed for their safety. And if we were told that so far from being apprehensive of danger, they fancied their position one of imminent security, that they pointed with pride to the thickness and solidity of the timber under their feet, laughing to scorn every suggestion that their footing might by and by prove less sound than they imagined, we should conclude that their minds must be strangely constituted. Does it not seem extraordinary then that so little should be thought of a position far more perilous, in which all the inhabitants of the earth are continually placed? Their position resembles, more nearly than we most of us think, that of persons floating on the surface of the sea, on a raft of great strength and thickness, it is true, but yet not proof against the fury of the waves, and liable to sudden disruption of its parts. The only difference is that the sea on which we are floating is a sea of liquid fire, the molten elements of the main substance of the Earth.